We're now on Daf Chavav Amid Beis, and we want to know Machsheves Psul, like Chutz's Mano or Chutzim Komo, does that register when the mincha is in his left hand? B'chishev aleha, right? He had the wrong Machshava, whether it's made Chutzim Komo, Hosel v'Ein Kares. Meaning that even though he had a machshav of chutz's mana, which normally generates a chiyuv pigul, which means if you eat from the pigul you chayiv kares, that doesn't apply because he had the machshava at the moment that the mincha was in his left hand. Now, we're not discussing the question of why it's possible. I mean, that itself is an issue which is addressed by Tosfos. And Biyamino, but if on the other hand he had these machshavas chutzim koma while he was holding it yamino, chishev aleha is if it was chutzim koma that we said is always a psul of machshavas chutzim koma, but doesn't generate a chiyuv a chaloshe pig with the chiyuv kares. But chutz mano if he had a machshava while it was in his right hand of what of chutz lizmano. Is pigo v'chayav nolakar. It's divrei Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shimon, v'chachama omrim kevin shenisana l'smol pisalato matnoso. So this whole assumption that he can hop it back and forth from his right hand to his left hand and back to his right hand, that's only according to Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shimon. But according to the Rabbanon, the very moment that he takes it into his left hand is like nishbach adam. But again, nishbach adam would have to be before the Kabbalah, meaning it went straight from the animal's neck onto the ground, the Ritzvas Azor. My timer, Mishum Deboy, Kidushe Bekli, Vekevan Shenesono, Lismolo, Nasa, Kedam Nishpach, Mitzav, or Behem al Ritzvah. Just like in the case of Shchita in a Zeva, the dam spurts out of the neck of the animal and it goes into a Kli. But if it went onto the ground, then it's possible. Even though he can collect the dam from the floor of the Azor, that's not going to be machshir because he hasn't yet done a Kabbalah. And in the case of a kometz, the kmitza has to be received in a klishares in order to be makadeshit. And in order to do so, like the case of Kabbalah's dam, he's got to be Makabal dam Neklisharis in his right hand. And so too, if he has a second Kiddush with the komets that goes into the Klishares, he's got to have it in his right hand. And that's the sheet of the Chachamim that came in Shinasoro Lismo Pasalato Matnoso. Michlal says the Gemara, the Rebbe Lozo, Rebbe Shimon boy Matan Kli. Apparently, Rebbe Lozo and Rebbe Shimon don't require that you receive the komets into a Kli. It's only the Rabbanan who say that you have to receive the komets into a Kli. And if you were holding the Kli, the Kohen's holding the Kli's left hand, then it's like spilling the dam before the Kabbalah Saddam, which passes the carbon. You can't even collect the dam for the Ritzvah Azara. But the implication now is that Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, they don't require, right, this whole thing about invalidating the Kabbalah and a Kli because he's holding the Kli in his left hand. That doesn't apply according to Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon because you don't even need the Kli. So it means that Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon don't require a second Kiddush, Tiyuv to the Rab Nachman, Tiyuv to. So the Gemara says the following: Li Rabbi Yehuda Breid Rabbi Chia Misayele. This brisa that quotes Rabbi Shimon and requires that the komets, if it was in his left hand, he has to jolly it back like a yo-yo back into his right hand. That would support the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Chia. That according to Rabbi Shimon, the avoda, if he opts with the hekesh to Osham to perform the avoda by hand. Right now, we don't need Kiddush Kli for the second Kiddush, but he can do it with his hand, but it's got to be his right hand. Correct the Gemara, but Rabbi Yanai lema to heavy tuvta. Rabbi Yanai holds that when he opts for receiving the komets without a kli in his hand, then he can use any hand, right or left. Okay, so there's another Tana of a Brisa with regard to Hekter Chalov Veivarim, and according to that Tana, he holds that again, that's a Tana of a Brisa. He holds that according to Reb Shimon, the avoda could be performed with the left hand, even though he's avoiding a second kiddush, which he can cut out the second kiddush in a klishares, and the avoda could be done in a left hand. The lavlit stadar patan. I don't need to chop up this brisa into stadar. The Tana of the brisa regarding the hekter chalav varvarim, who holds that according to Reb Shimon, the avoda could be performed with his left hand. The brisa that you're quoting, that's against the brisa that quotes Rabbi Shimon, the brisa of hekter chalav varvarim, and they hold that if the Kohen opts to do the avoda by hand and completely circumvent the kli, he's got to do it in his right hand. But that's not Rav Yana. Rav Yana says he could use any hand, even his left hand. Now the Mishnah says, Hiktir kumtza pamayim che. What's this whole business about two kazesim? On Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, pamayim velo pame pamayim. The Mishnah allows the burning of the komets of one zayis and then a second zayis, but not a third zayis. Which means that you cannot divide up the komets into three different sections. You need two, and you could be maktir the komets with one, and then be maktir the komets with the other half. Rabbi Yochanan Amar pamayim afilu pamayim. It doesn't matter how many times you divide up the komets, and you keep doing the haktorah, and doesn't matter. What's the source of this machlok? Zomer Abzera, yesh komets pachas mishtei zeisim, yesh haktor b'chusim mikazayis, ikabeinayu. The machlokus revolves around whether or not you can have a kmitza on less than two zeisim. I don't know. How does Rabbi Zera know that a kometz is done with two zeisim? How do we know that? Sachar Kol, the Kmitza is with these three fingers. How is he going to get two Zaysims? Well, I don't know. But that's his assumption. And then we add another principle that is Aktara in less than a Kazayis. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is of the opinion that what Ein Komets Pokos Mishtei Zays, to do a Kmitza, you have to have two Zays. Ein Haktar Pchuso Mikazayis. And for the Haktorah, you need a Kizayis. Rabbi Yochanan Tzovar, Yesh Komets Pachos Mishtei Zeisim. All you need is one Kizayis. V'yesh Haktorah Pchuso Mikazayis. So even if he divides up the komets into very small sections, and he does the Haktorah according to Rabbi Yochanan on all of these little sections, doesn't matter, because there is such a thing as Haktorah Pchuso Mikazayis. And this is a gigantic sugya. He doesn't tell you exactly where it is, but that's it. Itmar komets me emasai matir shirayim b'achila. We were always saying that when the komets goes up in smoke, it's matir the shirayim for achila, for the kohanim to eat the shirayim. Well, does it have to be burned completely, or it's the beginning of the burning process? And here we have a controversy. Rabbi Chia Omer Misha Mashlabo. Or as soon as the fire catches onto it, that's already a chalos matir, and he can eat the shirayim. Rabbi Yochanan, no. Mishetatsis boas or berubo. You have to burn most of the komets, and then that is matir the shirayim lachila. Omar Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Bar Rabbi Yitzchak Asbro Lachatami Rabbi Yochanan. I'm going to explain Rabbi Yochanan. Why is it that he needs rov? Omakra v'nei Allah kitar ha'aretz kitar. This is a story about Sdom. Anyway, the smoke of the land rose like the smoke of a furnace. And kivshem ma'ila kitar achatatzis or because when you're talking about the smoke coming out of the furnace. It's not the beginning of the fire, but it's the advanced level of the fire, which means beruba. Most of it was ignited. Amalei Rav Adler Rav Amri Talmidach Omer Rav Am, your student, who said in the name of Rav Amr Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Ein li ela dvarim shedarkon li kari v'layla. What can I derive from this pasuk? Is that which is burnt at night. What do we burn at night after the day of the korban kagone farm darim shemal maktira mibar shemesh? After nightfall, we can still put them on the mizbech and burn them. Misakli v'holchin kol halayla kula. And therefore, since burning over the course of the night, then it'll burn rove. But Dvar Shedar can only cover by Yom. But in the case of a kometz, where you have to burn the kometz by day before Shkiyas Achama, or the Levona, or Ktoris itself, or Minchas Kohanim, Minchas Kohen Mashuach, or Minchas Asachim, Ala Maktir Mibo Shemesh. 1 second. Especially by the clock. Steve, you have a few extra minutes? Yeah? Okay, good. That takes off the pressure from me because, there's a lot in the daf, a lot. And it's, for me personally, it's hard. Again, maybe if you give a short summary and you have pictures on the wall and stuff like that, you can move like the speed of light. So again, Rav Amram is telling us that there are a varim upidarim, and their hakrava, their aktara, could be after sunset. Rashi points out that the Gemara is going to pick this up a little later on. So right now we're exempt from understanding why the varim upidarim could be put on the mizbech after sunset. That's a premise, and that's called mibo hashemesh, after sunset. Okay, so now you have the entire night and it's burning. But then you have Devarim Shedarkon Likar B'Yom. And he says, Ma'alim Aktir Mibo Hashemesh. This whole list is, according to the literal translation of the Brisa, means that you can put them on the Mizbeach after nightfall, after Shkia. That's not so. All these things require Yom. That's called Dvarim Shedarkon Likar B'Yom. So the Gemara immediately tries to correct this. So therefore you have to rewrite the last line in the Brisa where it says Mi Bo Hashemesh. It doesn't mean Mi Bo Hashemesh, but Ela Im Bo Hashemesh, meaning you put it there right before sunset. Then the Brisa says Misaklim v'holchin kol halayla minayin tabelomer zos toras ha'ola riba. Okay, so what's going on over here? You're allowing, through this ribui of zos toras ha'ola, in the cases that we listed in the Sefer this price, we're allowing it to burn through the night because he put it on the fire before Shkia, right before Shkia. So the Gemara says, I don't get it. Va'im bo hashemesh, you just corrected the Brisa to read im bo hashemesh, meaning the last minute before sunset, is lo mashkachas leishatatzis ha'or. Berubo, how can you say like Rabbi Yochanan that in order to be matir you need a hakrava, in which case the fire burns most of what you put on the fire, where you just put it up right before Shkia. There's not enough time for it to burn. Lo kasha kan liklot. kan lahati. Oh, this is real lumdus here. This is kudshim, kudshim. He's saying the following, that there are two dinim. This is my mamish a brisket two dinim. There's one din which is the hechsher korban, and there's another din of the korban's power to be matir. When Rabbi Yochanan says you need that most of the, let's say the mincha has to be ignited, that's halacha in matir, in being matir the shirayim. But even Rabbi Yochanan agrees that liklot, meaning if you want to just be yotzei the korban, and be machshir the korban, as long as you put it on the eish before sunset, before shkia, even though it's going to be burnt during the course of the night, the korban is kosher. Now, what's this all about? This is all about lina. There's a psul lina. If you didn't put the korban, I mean the evarim, the chalavim, the murim, if it wasn't put on the eish right before the end of time, of its allotted time, which means here, the nightfall, and the korban is possibly mishum lina. So to undermine or circumvent the problem of lina, it's enough that you put it on the mizbeach, on the eish of the mizbeach, right before shkia. You've already registered it, liklot, and that will remove the psul of lina. However, if you're talking about being matir the shirayim, then you need ad sheyotzes bo ruba, according to Rabbi Yochanan. I'm just confused about one point over here. This only makes sense if you hold, like Rabbi Lazar, that yesh dam below basa. Let me just see if by chance in a million I'm on the right track here. No, he doesn't mention anything here. Anything in Tosus off the top? No. Okay. Rabbi Lazar offers another interpretation of the Brisa. Masi le mi bo hashemesh. Right, he has the original girsa in the Brisa. Mi bo hashemesh. Umukim lo pokim. Okay, this is a whole other sugya in Kachim called pokim, which means that something fell off the mizbeach, off the eish of the mizbeach. That's called pokim. He says partially consumed avarim, which burst, right? What happens is that once you put it on the fire and you remove the liquids, or shall we say the moisture, because that immediately goes up, the vapor just dissipates. That's going to cause the leftover parts to be propelled off the mizbeach. And the Gemara in Zvachim derives from a pasuk that under certain circumstances you could put it back on the mizbeach, which means if yardu olu. So the Bryce is referring to a situation in which the korban was brought on the mizbeach before sunset, and then if the pieces on the mizbeach were projected off the mizbeach, you could return them even after sunset. V'chein ki asar Rav Dimi Amar Rav Yanai bepokim. Umi Amar Rav Yanai hachi. You're quoting Rav Yanai to saying that we're talking about pokim. For Amar Rav Yanai ktores shepaka me'al gabi mizbeach afilu krotim sheba ein machzirosa. And I think when it says krotim sheba, it means he has major parts of the Ketores, he can't put it back on. V'tari Rab Chiva, Asher tochala eish es olam mizbeach, ikule ola to machzir v'yah to machzir ikule Ketores. So how could this halach apply to Ketores? How did Rav Yani explain the Brisa, which mentions Ketores explicitly as referring to the requirement to put it back on the mizbeach after it was pokeah from the mizbeach, it burst forth and fell from the top of the mizbeach? Well, guess what? According to Rav Yanai, forget about Rav Yanai, but Yeah, Rav Yana, actually. It's Rav Yana himself who says that Ketor Shepokom Yagami Mizbeach is Ein Machzirin Oso. And where it says Sami Mikan Ketoris, we have to take it out of the Bryce. So let's just quickly finish up the daf. Omar Rav Asi, Ki Pashit Rav Elazar Menachos. When Rav Elazar was studying Masechta Menachos Boy, he had this question. Komitz is Sidro, V'Sidro Olav Tzamaroch, Mau. Normally, the komitz is put on the bottom. And I'm sorry, the eitzim are put on the bottom, and then you put the komitz on top. But what happens if you reverse the order and he put the fire on top and it's burning, 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 and it burns the komitz mitachas? Shall we say there aktar b'kach? Is that considered an acceptable, normal manner of burning? Oh, ain't there aktar b'kach teku? There's no answer. Boy chizkiah a varm shesidrum. The same question that we had here in the name of Rav Asi, we're going to have now with regard not to the komets, but to a varim meaning in a regular carbon of a zevach, where you have the varim that have to be burnt on the mizbeach. And he was masader in such a way, Siddur Aleim Samaroch, he put the avarim on the mizbeach directly, and then he put the eitzim for burning it on top of the avarim. Now, shall we learn the pasuk al ha'etzim amrachmana, meaning dafka al ha'etzim. O Dilma came into Ksiv Kroachrini Yashatokalesh Esa Olav Al Mizbeachi Boyachi Avidi Boyachi Avateku. Just 1 second. What does it mean? Al ha'etzim amrachmana? Dafka al ha'etzim. Oh, I got it. Al ha'etzim. Okay, I'm sorry. I missed the... Dafka al ha'etzim means that the avarim have to be placed on the eitzim. The fire is on the bottom. Or should we say no? There's another pasuk that says so it sounds like you put the ola on the mizbeach, which is now the avarim, and then you put the eish, and it burns and consumes the ola that's underneath it. And the question is, based on these two psukim, shall we say can he do it in each way and arrange the avarim either on top or on the bottom? Take it, we don't know. Boy, Rav Yitzchak nafka avarim shesidra b'tzidei marochamal. What happens if he puts the parts of the animal, the limbs of the animal that have to be burnt, but he doesn't put it on top of the fire, but rather on the side of the fire? Aliba demandi omer al mamish. This is a machlokus in Shas, which he tells you to look later on in this Masechta in the 11th perek with regard to the bazichin of the levona, which were placed upon the lechem aponim, between the racks of bread or on top of the racks. Right? Do you do it between the racks or on top of the racks? And all that hinges on how you learn v'nosata al hamareches levona zaka. What does the word al mean? Mean on or near? How do you translate the word al? Then for sure this is not acceptable because the Torah requires that you put it al ha'esh, meaning al ha'etzim. And he put it on the side. Now we're on Daf Chav Zayin. The al ha'etzim ksiv. But kiti boilecha. My suffix is aliv. The man al besamach. That even if something is not on top, but it's near, that's also called al. And that applies in the Mishnah later on in the 11th chapter, whether the bazichin of the levona are placed dafka on top of the lechem upon him, or between the two racks of the lechem apanim is shall we say that here maybe you can't use besom? It's not enough to put it, to put the limbs on the side of the fire. Why? Because al eitzim dumyid al mizbeach ma hasam al mamish. Right? We know for sure that when you have to put something on the mizbeach, it's got to be mamish on the mizbeach. It can't be next to the mizbeach. Avhacha here too. With regard to the aktaras murim, nami al mamish, we here will require that he place the limbs on top of the wood that's burning and not on the side teku. And this leads us to the Mishnah Daf Chav Zayin Omer Aleph Yasher Koyach. I'll take this opportunity to wish you a great Shabbat.